So namaste and welcome to Satsang. So Satsang is where we come to not only understand the truth about what we really are, but also to begin to experience it, because the truth of what we actually are is very, very different to what we may have been raised to believe that we are. In fact, it's extraordinarily different, and to recognize that truth and begin to live from that and as that is going to have a profound impact on our life. And as such, being in satsang is really a commitment for a way of life, an orientation, rather than something we're doing. It's more a journey inside our own being, where we already are, but perhaps haven't realized fully. So as part of that, it really serves us every now and again to take a look at if we are coming to our awakening, our satsang, in the most intelligent way. There is several great myths that pervade the kind of awakening journey that have been believed again and again and again and passed down through the generations that I found slowed me down, and in fact sometimes made it impossible to progress until I'd really begun to question these myths. What I mean by a myth, I mean something that's everybody kind of has gotten a hold of, the idea that it's true and it's really not. And because it isn't true, but we're believing it, we keep experiencing it. If we're not a separate being at all, we're actually the universe experiencing itself as a human being, then any wrong idea that we have about ourselves or the world or awakening or other beings, we're going to experience in a very real way. So it's worthwhile just double checking that we aren't believing any of these stories and checking them out for ourselves. And one of these stories that I encountered that you may be doing battle with right now, or have been, is the idea that it's the mind, it's our mind, our thinking, noisy mind, that is really the trouble in our life. And that may seem a strange thing to even say when perhaps for the large part of the day, the waking state, our mind is just constantly talking about everything it can find to talk about. Even worse than that, perhaps sometimes it's talking about the same thing over and over again, incessantly, as if it's trying to change something by talking about it. And usually what first draws us to awakening is a very noisy mind, and perhaps a very dysfunctional life because of that, or to some degree our life isn't flowing very well. Whatever our mind is thinking about habitually, we'll have to experience in our outer world, because there really isn't an outer world. It is us too. If we're everywhere all the time, then there's really just the one being, the universal being, that's experiencing itself in all of these forms, especially all human beings. So it's worthwhile really looking at, is this really true? Is it our mind that is the problem? Because if we just assume that to be true, even though it really seems, the problem is my mind is talking and it just won't shut up. It just won't stop. And perhaps if you're anything like me, maybe 75, 80%, 85% of those thoughts each day are attacking myself. And maybe the rest of them are attacking others. And some days that flipped around, but it was some version of that. Doubting myself, doubting my awakening, all of that. So it's easy to form this conclusion actually that it is mind that's the trouble. If I could just get beyond it, or if I could just get it to be quiet, or if I could just find a way to have it not affect me, then I would be free. And it's easy to see why we would draw that kind of conclusion. But what if that's not actually the problem? What if there is something much more fundamental and, perhaps more importantly, much easier to fix? Maybe mind isn't the root of the issue, the noisy mind. Maybe the noisy mind is a symptom of one core idea that we have about ourselves. Maybe there's a way to undermine a whole thought stream that we experience. Maybe there's a way to simplify awakening and to begin to undercut all of these self-attacking thoughts and judgmental thoughts of ourselves and others. We can spend a lifetime or many lifetimes trying to heal our mind, trying to get beyond it, transcend it, all of that. But in the end, we might come, or even sooner, which is the point of what I'm saying today, to question, have I really found the most important thing here to do in my awakening, to focus upon? What if there is no way to stop the mind in the way that we're trying to do? What if there is no way to eliminate these kinds of thoughts in the way that we are taught to try? What if mind and its noise and its repetitious thoughts are a symptom of some greater, more fundamental thing? Wouldn't it make more sense than trying to treat only the symptom of something to actually go to treat the root cause of it and begin to eliminate it on a fundamental level, which will give us permanent peace? And all of our mind's thinking, if we really begin to look at the content of our mind, if we just kind of watch what the thoughts are about on a day-to-day basis, we'll find that the vast majority of them are based on this idea that it's our mind trying to reformulate experiences, anticipate the future for a better result, rehash the past so that we feel better, based on this one idea that we are this separate being. And as you begin to realize that you might not be that separate being at all, that maybe you are something much greater than that, not that there's anything wrong with being a human being, you are a unique expression of this universal being. But can your mind ever find rest? Can it ever come back into peace and silence if it's trying to fix an impossible problem? Maybe it's been given a task to do that it's not capable of completing. Maybe that's why it's going around in circles trying to resolve something that is unresolvable. There is no way for us to have the happy, peaceful life, the abundant life, the quiet mind that we're all hoping for, or at least a positive thought stream, thoughts that make me feel good, thoughts that are loving and accepting of myself and others, if we're working from the wrong idea. It would be like having a virus on the software on this laptop and expecting it to work properly, expecting it not to get caught up. And yet every person begins to come to satsang, at least, from this idea that all they need to do is treat the symptom. But if we treat the root cause, if we really investigate, am I actually what I thought? This has to begin to cause you to recognize that all of my thoughts, all the thoughts that I'm battling with, all the negative emotions that result from those, all of my challenges with awakening itself, could be a symptom of this wrong idea I've had about myself. And what happens to the content of the thought stream when I actually begin to recognize what I really, really am? Can I still keep thinking that I have to wake up, I have to find the truth, I have to let go of all my judgmental thoughts, even if I see that I am already this universal being? Can I really still perceive myself as only in one place in time and space, needing this other thing outside of me, or needing some inner state that I'm looking for? If I come to see that I'm everywhere, and what effect will that have upon our awakening? What will that do to our mind? So throughout spirituality, especially in my own journey, there was this constant culture in non-dual direct teachings such as this of blaming our mind, of making it the source of all our anger, the source of all of our blaming, all of our projecting that everything that was going wrong with my awakening is due to my mind. I just can't seem to get away from it. I can't seem to make it go quiet, all of those things. So I just like to, I really do feel that that attitude kind of holds us back. Yes, our mind may be incredibly noisy, but can it ever find the resolution that it's trying to find? It's running these hypothetical situations in our mind, isn't it, over and over again, about the past, the present, and the future, trying to get and establish and achieve what we really want, which is a happy life, to feel loved, to feel safe, to feel accepted, to feel free, to feel joyful, to feel free of any suffering at all. Can your mind really do that if it's starting off from this wrong premise? And even when we've seen what we actually are, that it's something much more vast and expansive than we could have possibly perceived, I still every single day encounter beings that are berating the old thoughts that are left from the old way of perceiving ourselves. But when the old thoughts I have left, as I begin to see what I am, are still going during this changeover, where my mind is still thinking, is where I'm still operating as a separate being, still coming from that premise that I am just a someone alone in time and space, trying to make it through life and trying to achieve or accumulate anything I can before we reach the end. And again, I have to ask, is it going to be useful to reject that old thinking? Or is it much more efficient to basically see this is just old thinking? And as I begin to see this problem, this karmic pattern, this relationship issue, this lack of something I need, this too much of something I want to get rid of, is all based on this idea, the remnants of this idea that I am a separate being. What if clearing up our karmic patterns was really as simple as that? Can I still have problems with other beings if I've realized that I'm everywhere? Or perhaps Clara said, if I'm still having problems with other beings, have I fully realized I'm everywhere? If I'm still wanting or needing things desperately that I can't seem to get, have I fully embraced my universality? Have I come to recognize yet that I must be the thing I'm trying to get? I must be that other being that I'm having a challenge with, a difficulty with. And just like everything else, our mind really simply only needs understanding and love and acceptance, that it's become so fractured, so splintered, so fragmented only because it's been trying to do a job based on the wrong information. It's been trying to sort out problems based on the wrong information. It's been trying to get you what you need, whether that's an inner thing such as love and respect or security, or an outer thing such as time or money or the right relationship, based on this false premise. So I hope this kind of inspires you to make friends with your mind a little bit, or a lot, or completely, because it really was only when I began to try to understand why my mind was talking so much, when I began to want to recognize what was fueling the thoughts, rather than just looking at the thoughts themselves. What is making my mind think? What's sustaining this repetitive, habitual thought that is just going on and on? And it really was only one thing every time, that I was trying to fix a problem that seemed very real as a separate being, that just began to evaporate when I remembered my universality again. And even the greatest problem of all, how to become, live as, move into that universality, which mind spends a lot of time thinking about, doesn't it? How to realize and how to be this universal self. Even this problem is fixed by recognizing what's true. I am already that. To whatever extent I have seen that in this moment, if I remember that, apply it to anything that's coming up in mind, it's like a soothing balm to the mind. It begins to allow it to go back into silence. And as we confirm again and again that every single issue that could affect our separateness, our separate being, no longer applies. It's not avoidance of problems, it's just moving to that place where they no longer exist, and therefore our life begins to reflect that back to us. If we keep fighting against our mind and blaming it for our disturbance, our lack of serenity, then we're never going to get to the end of it. We're only going to make it worse. There's no way as a separate being to come to the end of suffering. There's no way when we're pushing against our thoughts that have been generated from the idea that we're a separate being to come to the end of suffering. But there is one answer that works every single time. Is this true for my universal being? I am the universal being. There is nothing other than me, nothing outside of me. I am everywhere at all times. I cannot be absent from anywhere. Anything that I perceive or experience or interact with, any other being that I come across, must be this universal being also. And like anything in an authentic spiritual path, the solution is always much simpler than we give ourselves, than we allow ourselves to really see. The solution is to move to the place, the true place, to take a stand as that place, that universal being, where none of our issues can survive. Not because we're ignoring them or avoiding them, but they simply were never true in the first place. By seeing my every awareness, we begin to experience that. We begin to notice these issues dropping away. So if it sounds too simple, I would urge you to try it anyway, just to give it a go. Make friends with your mind if you want to, and just spend some time thinking about, can your mind ever fix the problems that are appearing in your life? if it's doing it with the wrong information. You know, if you've ever tried to put some furniture together, you know, one of these flat pack things that comes, I tried recently to put a bed together, and a single bed, ended up asking for help from Ian because the diagram was completely misleading. All the pieces were there, which was great to start off with, but this diagram, it had all these step-by-step things, and it just looked completely like gibberish to me. So if you haven't got a clear plan, a clear outline of how to do that, when you put it together, it's going to look something very different to the picture, isn't it? And eventually you realize that's not working. Putting my life together using the mind, trying to think my way through things and problems isn't really going to do it. But I can investigate whether the problems are really true for what I really am, actually. And this just naturally takes the pressure off our mind. And it begins to relax, begins to go back into silence. It begins to give back all the energy that's been invested in it, that leaves us feeling exhausted. Can you imagine for a moment how much energy it takes to constantly try to fix all this multitude of problems that appear as a separate being, when in fact we never have actually been a separate being, ever? Can you imagine how much energy it takes to believe ourselves to be cut off from everything and everyone, when actually everything and everyone is inside us? We are that space in which all this is arising. So it's a simple way to kind of begin to fix these issues. See if you can make friends today with your mind a little bit more. See if you can leave some gap in your consciousness that maybe your mind isn't the actual problem. Maybe it's a symptom of some much more fundamental thing. And if you do, you'll find something wonderful begins to happen. You begin to feel much more whole. You begin to suffer less immediately. Even if your mind is still talking completely, you won't be able to push against it. You won't be able to suffer. You won't be able to resist. There is really nothing that any being can say about you as a separate being that is true, least of all your own mind, because that's never been what you are. You know, I'm always looking for the shortcuts, the sneaky, the awakening cheats. And this is one of my most effective ones that I've found for myself. Okay, so I have two questions that have come in today. Well, one's feedback, but if anybody wants to ask a question, we've got one already. I'll take up to another 4. So we've got 2 now. Just in case somebody doesn't know how to work with Zoom, if you find the participants section, wherever that is on your device, and click on that and scroll to the bottom, it'll give you the option to raise your hand. So I'll start by reading these 2 questions, and then, so we've got 3 questions now. We'll just take one more if anybody has another one. The first one is, if you were in Satsang on Thursday evening here with me, you might remember the beautifully brave question that I read out. No more questions now, thanks. There's enough there, thanks. From this person who was really struggling with shame, and the whole satsang was pretty much based on that question because it was a universal issue for all of us. So they've been very kind enough to send some feedback from listening to that, and I thought you might like to hear it. It says, "Dear Helen, OMG, I am the being that sent in the question that you read in satsang entitled From Self-Hatred to Self-Love. I was driving home from work on Friday evening and thought I'd listen to one of your satsangs. I often listen on the way to work, on the way home, while exercising, cleaning, you name it. So there I am driving along like normal, listening to the wisdom teachings of HH. When I heard you read my question, I nearly crashed the car. I have since listened to the full satsang at least 4 or 5 times. I cannot begin to thank you enough for your loving compassion and the love, warmth, and support I felt from all those beautiful beings listening. Just listening with an open heart has made me feel so much lighter. I can already feel a shift in the way I feel about myself, a very positive shift. I'll continue to follow your guidance and question if it's really true that I am not worthy, if there is something really flawed about me. So far, I am receiving only silence and a sense of peace and self-love when I ask. That's beautiful, isn't it? And I wouldn't say only, I'd say that's an extraordinarily good answer. That's the experiential answer, the actual experience in this moment of really living from that place where there never was anything wrong with you, where there's only silence, only peace, and self-love. So I would take the only out of that if I were you, and just really, this is what all of us want, isn't it? Just when we start to question if there's ever anything wrong with us at all in the first place, look what happens. I thought to tell you a little bit more about the me. Sometimes I refer to myself as the me, a technique I learned to help raise a level of awareness and not forget that this body mind is not the true self. The me is a 43-year-old female, happily married, mother of 2, aged 6 and 8 from Australia. As you're aware, the me has had many psychological struggles. It has experienced many occasions of being humiliated, laughed at, judged, and this led to a feeling of inferiority and shame. The me has compared itself to others all its life and held the belief that it's inferior, and the intrusive thoughts imprinted this more deeply. Others would never think these thoughts. I'm awful, there's something wrong with me, etc., etc. I would say it has very good emotional intelligence, however. The me has also been drawn to and admired intelligence, especially those with the ability to express themselves clearly, something the me believes it is very poor at. The me will never think anything it's written is as good as others and lacks trust in its own ability. So you can imagine the me surprise when you actually chose to read its words and were touched by them. The mere fact that others resonated with them and it may have helped them in some way is truly heartening. Well, hopefully you're beginning to see that you're not the only one dealing with this, that it is inherent in the human condition as a separate being. The first thing that happens when I can't get my mind to shut up or I can't get my problems solved is I begin to turn that back upon myself. I begin to think there's something deeply wrong with me. And that's just feeds this cycle around and around then. One last thing I've noticed about the me is it takes a great pride in its appearance and likes to look attractive to get attention, probably to try and make up for all the other areas it feels it's lacking. Humans are definitely very complex. Yep. I'll keep at it, inquiry, questioning, meditating, and accepting the content of the thought stream is not chosen and I am not responsible. With this, I pray that the energy field will lift and the thoughts will begin to dissipate or be there but not believed in. Well, that's already happening, isn't it? You said earlier that you're beginning to feel quite different about yourself. And that really is what self-love is. You begin to see yourself as someone that is worthy, something that is fundamentally perfect, and that only our ideas about ourselves have been played out again and again. Okay, and the idea that you said, the thing that you said there is wonderful, that even if the thoughts are still there, I can be having those thoughts but not believing them. That's the fundamental thing, isn't it? You know, I had forgotten that prior to sending that question, I had met you in a dream. Not surprising since I listened to you incessantly. And you said, "We are all here for you." Ain't that the truth? After your response, I really feel you, the Satsang community, and the universe is supporting me every step of the way. How different that was to before. Thank you for the light you bring. I'm so very grateful. If we're all one, then I am you, so I'm Ace. Yes, you are. Lovely. Thank you for the feedback. Okay. It's always wonderful to hear. Next question says, Namaste, Helen. Many thanks for these satsangs. I am very grateful. My question is about free will. When an abiding shift in consciousness occurs and one surrenders to the life force moving through one, everything that needs doing gets done effortlessly. The doer, the ego or separate self is no longer active in the sense of controlling or desiring or resisting. Life really does become simpler, more flowing and enjoyable. So what part, if any, does free will play in all this? Where and how does free will apply in one's life? Thank you. This is a question that happens very often, doesn't it? What really is my choice and my power then if I am not really the separate being, the doer that I thought I was? And really, there's only one choice, really only one place our free will resides in any moment, and that is whether in any moment I have a choice whether to live as what I really am or whether to live as the old idea of myself. As I begin to live as what's true, that's a choice I can make in any moment, especially once I begin to see what I really am. Then it's always in my power to be able to choose. I can live as my authentic self, and I can live as the separate being. As a separate being, my choices are going to be limited. My actions, my words, my thoughts, as we said in Thursday Satsang, are coming out of whichever energy field I'm subscribing to, whichever level of consciousness or attitude towards life. And as such, those thoughts and actions will be very, very limited. But as the infinite self, I have access to infinite resources, infinite variety of thoughts, actions, and I end up automatically taking the highest thoughts, the highest actions in any moment. So we don't really have free will in the way that we think, perhaps, as I'm a separate being here choosing what I'm going to do. But as a universal being, we have free will in any moment to recognize our universality or not. And when we recognize it, everything opens up for us as you described in this email. Everything happens effortlessly. Everything begins to unfold. And where it's not occurring like that is simply where we're exercising our free will in not the most helpful way. We're still identifying with the body and mind. There's nothing wrong with the body and mind at all, but just to see that that's not all we are. And wherever we're suffering will be where we're not making this free will choice to see clearly. So I hope that's helpful. Lovely. So we'll start with these questions. I'll go to Ron to begin.
Good morning, Neil.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Excellent, thank you. So the questions that kind of start this process, I guess they are generated by the mind.
Yeah.
Um, do you equate the mind with the ego?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't tend to really label them as such. I tend to think of mind or ego as just the sum total of the collection of the thoughts I have about myself when I think I'm a separate being, so that it's not something separate or it's just the sum total of my perception of myself as a separate being.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing you say is as the mind hears and understands that it doesn't really have any problems to solve, that generally, maybe not always, but generally will start to quiet or maybe it's not really quieting down, but I am making the one choice to place my attention on my true self, which is not the mind. Um, and by either lack of oxygen or just lack of attention for that it just recedes into something that is less prominent. And that takes us to a place where instead of living what we think, that we are living experientially.
Yeah, very much. It's
Okay, just
when you see that the problems that seem to be here only seem to be here because you haven't seen the fullness of what you are, that naturally cuts the oxygen to the mind anyway. You know, that I can keep trying to solve this problem that seems to be here, and I keep experiencing over and over again. And then I begin to see that it never was actually true, but I experienced it over and over because I had this wrong idea about myself. And I had this idea that there were all these other beings and other things that I need, and as you begin to see through that, it naturally begins to, you lose interest in trying to think about things in the same way, because when you go into mind, when you go into duality, those problems seem extraordinarily real. They feel real. We experience them again and again. And you have more and more of a seeing that, but you know, that none of that was ever actually who I am. Then naturally that begins to give you some distance from thoughts. At first it's okay, they might still be there, but you can't entertain them in the same way as you did before. And then through, as you said, through sort of lack of use, the thought patterns just begin to die away. Like anything that you don't use on a regular basis begins to atrophy. And it's kind of like that with mind, isn't it? That if I realize it can't really solve the problems because they're not true in the way that I thought they were, that naturally leads to a disinterest in trying to think my way through things.
yeah, it's always the paradox there is that, so what is it that's disinterested and not trying to think its way through things? Is that really another aspect, a deeper aspect of mind, because it's a form of thinking, or is that just the category that we describe as the knowing?
Well, I don't really see a difference between mind and knowing. You know, my mind is kind of a functionality of myself. When I think I have to do things, I think I have to get things, I think I'm, you know, just in one place. And it's more like the self. Well, for me, it was more like the self just kind of began to think about itself in unlimited ways rather than limited ways. And because of that, the limited ways of thinking, not having enough of this or that, you know, not enough awakening, not enough peace, just began to fade away. And then even gradually those thoughts about being the unlimited self began to fade more and more, because it was just much more fun to experience in the moment what is actually real than think about it.
So we're really shifting, maybe we might say, from, as a Course in Miracles might say, from wrong mind to right mind, and then right mind starts fading away to just the experience.
Yeah,
Okay.
naturally you just come to love feeling open and in an experiential understanding of what you are, finding out what all this is in the moment rather than thinking about it. And it gets clearer and clearer that if I think about something, that's exactly what I'm going to experience in the next moment. You know, and you just keep going through the same old reruns of life, then the same old experiences. So naturally you kind of you start to lose interest in that. There must be a more fun, spontaneous way to experience all of this. And it just allows mind to relax then, because it's not trying to, whatever it's trying to do, mind, it's always trying to get one up on the next moment, isn't it? So trying to get ahead of, plan ahead and all of that. You can still use the mind, but it's not, it's an optional thing then, rather than this incessant talking that goes on for most beings.
Thank you.
Good, good. Thank you. Lovely. Okay, Sergio.
Oh, hi, good morning, Helen.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. My question is, well, first of all, thanks for the feedback on the GP, and from that, I finally had a little taste, or maybe a huge taste of not start thinking about I'm not really this body. Finally, I got this experience that I am, or beginning to see that I had always been thinking that this was the body that is experiencing everything.
Yeah.
I don't know if I explain myself clearly, but so without the realization of saying, okay, if I'm this universal one being, and that everything is happening inside, all the furniture, all my wants and beliefs of the mind, work, this body, and all the bodies. And even this morning before I got up, I was dreaming of reminding me in the dream that I was not the body, that I was this universal one being. And being that, well, saying this or having this experience, and perhaps you already addressed it in this satsang, but my question was how to fuel more and more in a very easy and effortless way this oneness, or this habit, or being from this choice that we have being the universal being.
That's good. First, I'd say it's happening on its own, right? Because when you have a moment or a seeing that just feels so wonderful, you naturally, there's immediately a desire for more, isn't there? As you feel that. Just even a second of kind of recognizing that nothing that's ever happened to the body mind has ever affected you is enough to light a very big fire inside, isn't it? That I'd like to live from that place constantly. So when that desire arises, we can notice that probably the very next thing that's going to happen is you will be given all the reasons why you feel you can't live as that already, right now, effortlessly. So some sense of limitation, some sense of being held back will show itself, whether it's something in the body, something in your friendship, something in your work, something in your life. Some problem that's happening to the body and mind will present itself for you to exercise that free will that we were talking about and say, well, what am I going to do about this? Do I even need to do anything about this? So just to notice where that to get what you want, which is to live as this effortlessly, you're going to have to examine still where we're buying this idea that we are a body mind only again. And you'll notice the difference in feeling. One will feel really good, one will feel quite, well, really constricted and limiting. So you can tell when you're identifying with the body and mind because it feels awful. It feels too small. But also the other side of that is to cultivate curiosity, like just to gently invite what you've experienced to come back, to come back into your waking state. Just a gentle curiosity. What was that, and can I experience it again? Not trying hard, just to kind of, curiosity is the best word, but an openness. Just what is that? I'd like to see it again. I'd like to experience it again, and just a gentle invitation to it. it begins to break through more and more. And as you experience those moments and you enjoy them, you kind of get the message that there's a relaxation there. There isn't any trying there, is there? There's just a surrendered openness that makes it happen, that makes the natural state break through. And then when I notice myself trying or struggling or reaching for something, that's probably some identification with the body mind again. So curiosity, openness, and the fact that it's already happening and you can't stop it. That was really helpful for me to remember, because you can't stop it, you can't screw it up. The worst you could do right now is slow it down if you resist with everything you've got, but it is happening. So that was really helpful for me to remember, because again, if I am this separate being, there's something I can do to speed it up or slow it down. But if I am already that, it's just an unfolding of me seeing that, isn't it? And coming to live as it more and more. Gradually, each day, I'm spending more of my waking state being this consciously. I've always been it, but I thought I was something else.
Thank you.
Lovely. Well done. Fantastic. Okay, got to Rowena.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks for everything that you're doing. I have been working with the question, where am I, which has been really helpful. And I just wanted to ask a question to see if I'm on the right track, if there is such a thing. So
there isn't, right? There seems to be a track.
Exactly. It's, you know, when you're kind of asking a question and then you're like, part of you knows that, yeah, you can see the illusion of it. A perception that I'm aware of when I'm asking this question at times is that there's this sense that I am looking from the eyes, or I am looking from parts of the head. And my mind is interpreting that as an attachment to those, you know, the sight as who I am, or something like that. So what I'm trying to do in those moments is to then ask the question, who's noticing that sensation? Because I become very drawn into the sensation of the eyeballs or the head, and then to say, well, who's watching that? And that seems to help me refocus. But I'm trying to kind of fluctuate between asking that question and really looking into it and zoning in, and then kind of letting go and just letting all of the like whatever happens happen. It's just that at times that can become a very intense focus on these sensations. But then sometimes it melts. So yeah, that's just kind of a description of what's going on. And yeah, what are your thoughts?
It's very normal. When I first asked that question, there's a real sense while I'm here looking, you know, I'm just here in this, and here meaning this body, like looking through these eyes right now, listening through these ears, and that's never gone away. That's there's a sense that I am only here in this one place still, even now. There's a sense of being someone even now. But for me, the major shift was to realize that if that's the first answer that presents itself when I you know, some experience of the body mind, when I ask this question, where am I, that doesn't have to block me. If I just go, okay, that seems to be how it is, and I don't have to fight with that. Again, there's this huge myth that the sense of being someone will disappear upon realizing my every-awareness. But really, it's more like I realize my every-awareness in which the sense of someoneness is appearing. I realize the greater. So if I can just ask then, okay, I seem to be here only. Check, got that one. Is there any other answer to this question, where am I also? You know, without fighting, it's possible to feel that you are somewhere and yet to absolutely know you are everywhere all the time, which is a knowingness before thoughts. And while you have a human body and there's eyes to look through and ears to hear through, there will be a sense of just being here, in one place as well. So
Right.
there's a kind of, I'm going to say the word dualistic, but it's not really, because ultimately the same, but a sense of having a location here. I'm just in one place, looking at the universe from this one corner. And then also knowing that there's something so much greater than that also, that's looking from everywhere, every set of eyes and everything. So just not to get stuck in that trap that we all do, which is go, okay, I need to get rid of my someoneness to see my everywhereness, which everyone does. And I did it for about 10 years and it was so irritating because it's our egoic perspective, our mind's perspective is it must be one or the other.
Right. Yeah.
So it knows intellectually that I'm everywhere. So it tries to get rid of and it says, until I get rid of the feeling that I'm someone somewhere, I can't recognize what's true. And that will hold you back for a long time if you kind of, but to the self, it's both, isn't it? And not even both, because both they are one. I am this universal being, experiencing myself as also as this human being too. And they're not different or separate. So just notice those sensations when they come up and go, okay, what else is there? Where else am I? What else can I find in answer to that question?
That is really, really helpful, actually, because there's definitely a subtle belief that I do need to get rid of that sensation. And
I wish we could figure out where we got picked up this myth from, right? It's one of these great myths in awakening that if I haven't totally obliterated my sense of being someone, then I'm not self-realized. And it's just not possible to do that because, well, the body's there. You're going to feel, there'll be sense perception, there'll be emotions in the body, there'll be thoughts going on. But the difference being, you know that that's not all you are. It's an upgrade, an add-on, an extra.
Yes, and I think when I realize that the moments when I relax, and sometimes it's because I've directed myself to relax, and sometimes it's just because that's happened. I can still feel those senses, but it's just part of this kind of soup. That's what it feels like to me, that it's just that I'm not so focused on it, or I'm not so I can still feel it. Yeah. But it's just not this kind of thing that I'm trying to figure out, which is really interesting.
It's like when you ask any question, any contemplative question, the very first answers are going to be from the body mind, out the thoughts, emotions, sense perception. If I ask if it's true I'm not good enough, the first thing that's going to happen is thought answers, perhaps emotions, positive and negative. And that's a gimme for any question you ask, isn't it? There's going to be this physical sense of separate self giving, there's going to be phenomenal answers basically that come and go. If you just kind of accept that, okay, that's not anything going wrong.
Yes. That's really, really helpful. And just on a related note, because I remember when I first started doing self-inquiry, or when I first heard about it and tried to do it, and it just completely went over my head.
You and me
and
both.
It was big. Yeah, I just
couldn't figure it out at all.
Yeah, my mind was just so frustrated with it. I mean, having a very kind of a mind that is very strong and wants to be in control. It was saying, well, I'm here. I'm like, the mind was just saying, like, I'm watching this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And it's like, there wasn't any kind of idea that there could be something beyond on some level, because in other ways, like I was meditating already and I kind of knew that, but with the self-inquiry, it just didn't go through. And then I was having thoughts this week of, I like to buy my brother books. My brother also has like a very similar mind to mine, and he's not at all into this kind of stuff, but I'm kind of, drip feeding him things that I think he'll be interested in the hope that, that it will have some kind of, open his mind to this kind of stuff. I'm not wanting to convert him or anything, but
don't tell him you're asking the question, where am I? Because he'll think you're totally insane.
no, exactly. We're not there yet, but it's kind of thinking about, you know, how he would answer that question and how he might experience self-inquiry. I was kind of thinking, well, you know, then kind of transferring that question and trying to figure out, like, if I was having a conversation with someone like him who was more open, a future version of him, for instance, then, you know, like, I see teachers kind of deal with it so skillfully, but I guess, like, I can see in my own way of answering that at the moment, I'm not quite able to think about how I would answer that question. You know, how do you go beyond, because in my own experience, if someone says, well, you know, I'm here and it's me, it's my mind watching it, I can tell from my own experience that there's something beyond that, and that but I don't know how to answer that to someone else. Do you know what I mean?
I wouldn't even try to figure it out. That's a whole minefield, right?
I thought you might say that.
If someone's really asking from a place of really wanting to see, then whatever you say will be effective.
Yeah.
Even if you just kind of, I just feel like I'm beyond the mind and body and I can't really explain how, those words will have an effect.
Yeah.
If you're trying to kind of, you know, like we all do, is you start to realize the truth, we just suddenly decide that everybody else needs to know this too. And we try to tell them, and surprisingly enough, not everybody wants to know, as I found out to my shock afterwards. So anything, even the most beautiful, eloquent words from an awakened being then wouldn't have any impact at all, because the self as that being is just not interested in, it's still on some level enjoying, or interested in, I should say, that the idea of being a separate being only.
Yeah.
So it's more about the energy you're coming from, you know, even just to kind of be in an open space. What could I say right now to help? You know, and I found every time that when I just don't think about or plan what I'm going to say, something helpful comes out. And every time I try to be helpful, something unhelpful comes out.
Yeah, no, I totally relate to that. And that, yeah, thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Good.
Thanks.
Good to hear from you. Take care.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we'll go to Sophie.
Hello, Helen.
Hi, how you doing? We can't hear you, Sophie. I'm not sure what's happened.
Namaste.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
Can
you hear us?
Yes.
Good.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Just wanted to check before you went any further.
Yeah. Gosh, it's been so. Every question has been so deep today in terms of addressing everything. That I'm very grateful. So my question is kind of gone a bit, really. But I think it's a subtle. I mean, I know what I have the tools from you as to how to deal with this, but it's really that sense that when you are beginning to see that everything is yourself, and how there's still, I think I'm still getting stuck on there's, which we were sort of saying a minute ago, that there's a part that it still can't quite accept, like you're endeavoring to come from the higher way of thinking, or the highest outcome, and yet you're holding all this seemingly lower experiences or lower energies within that, and there has, for me, there's still this sort of self-righteousness that is like, well, there's this highest way, and either in myself or in others, it's not manifesting. And there's such a gentleness that needs to come with that within me to really allow it to be that that way, that it doesn't need to change so that it reflects any other way. And like you keep saying, it's not an experience, so you don't need to experience that kind of, maybe that's another question, but I know I need to question, is there anything that needs to change, or do I want something from myself or from others? And the answer is probably a very subtle yes. I want to experience the highest possible outcome or engagement with others, or you know, like when you're encountering someone who appears very materialistic or very set in that mindset, or you know, and you see it as, well, that's me, I'm like that, that is totally myself. I don't see it as a separate person. I know that I have all those characteristics and more, and just to bring that, I don't know, I'm just trying to touch on something that I know there's a dissolving that can take place, but also maybe just that lovingness to that.
Yeah, if you just as you begin to love your own self unconditionally, meaning, as you were saying, nothing at all needs to change about me in this moment to love myself. I'm not going to put conditions upon that. Then it begins to happen with other beings too, doesn't it? Where we get tripped up is when we begin to, or at least where I got tripped up, is where I begin to experience a higher place, when I begin to experience a different way to live my life that's so extraordinarily peaceful and joyful and spontaneous. Of course, I want that for other beings around me, or I want them to be interested in waking up and things like that, you know, like we were just saying with the previous question. But eventually we have to realize that actually even my highest intention for somebody else is going to be projecting onto them. And I don't really, even though they are me, I don't really know what is the right experience for that being. Or we can say whatever experience they're having is the right experience for their evolution, for their growth right now. You know, so that eventually we begin to question even the most noble of intentions that we have for other beings. I don't know if that kind of helps you to resolve it a little bit.
Yeah. Yes, because it's not like I have to really question it, because it's not just trying to a do-gooding thing. It's
I get it totally. You know, I used to, when I first started teaching, I so wanted everyone to wake up to see what I've seen, and I so wanted that I got in my own way, and I kept experiencing wanting everyone to wake up, but nobody actually waking up, because my want was a thing going out to the universe, and the universe had no choice but to agree with me. Yes, you still want that, but you're not getting it. So only when I began to see everyone as the perfect self already the awakeness, just a little confused about itself, you know. So I really understand that intense desire for other beings to get this too. You know, when you see what's really real about yourself, of course you're going to feel that, but eventually some kind of wisdom came of, okay, what's the best way for that to happen, for them to get it too. And it's got to be that the understanding comes that the highest thing that they can experience in this moment is what they're experiencing. And my intention for them is just going to limit what they can experience, because the moment I have an intention about someone, I've separated myself from them, and I'm lowering the energy field between us both without realizing. You know, it's the hardest desire really, because we have to first let go of it within our own self, and then about others as well, and then about the world in general.
So that sense that, okay, I'm meeting somebody or within myself, just it's got a little confused, or covered over, or however you,
or very confused, yeah, in some cases,
or very confused, or very, you know, and the outcome of that confusion can be very violent really, or whatever, towards another, you know, can take physical or hurtful actions towards myself or towards somebody else. So you see how
only going to be possible though if you're separating yourself from them. If you're undivided inside when you're with this being, those that intend you harm will have to move away. Either physical harm or psychological harm just won't be able to somehow make it into your energy field, because you are unconditionally loving and accepting of them. It doesn't mean you're going to be a doormat at the same time and just say, fine, do whatever you want, I'm not this body. But in that unconditional field of acceptance, they're going to have their best experience in this moment too. And if they don't resonate in a similar way with you, they just won't be able to be anywhere near you. You'll find that mine says it's safer if I keep my guard up because there are beings that try to hurt me. But really, as we begin to realize there aren't any other beings, there's just this God self that is sometimes acting in very self-centered, narcissistic ways when it's very, very confused about itself. Then the more that I come from the real place inside myself, don't separate myself from anyone, the more effect my energy will have on other beings, and I won't be my outer world then has no choice but to reflect that back to me, that it will bring me beings that are much more loving and accepting of me. And just to notice whether that's still going on, if there's someone around you that does intend you harm, or just isn't really of the energy that you would like them to be. It's just to look at where you might be holding some intention about them. Sometimes we're trying to make something happen when it really doesn't want to happen as well, meaning some awakening and some other being.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe it can't be worked on as such, but this loving
the only answer every time that I found to helping any other being was going deeper inside my own awakening, because only from that place can I actually make a difference, and only from that place am I not believing there's another being that needs help or needs to change or something like that. It's not that I wouldn't take any physical actions to help someone, of course I would, but the moment I sort of agree that they need help or they need to wake up, I'm actually diminishing them, and that effect becomes more prominent the more awake you get inside your own self. You hold an intention for someone, it begins to have a greater effect in a negative way. So the only surefire way to help someone is to continue your own awakening. That is enough. If you just stay 100% focused on your own awakening, what that own awakening means is actually the whole of the universe anyway, because you are the universal being. Can you see the difference in sort of attitude?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm applying it to myself without that separation. So I always see. So those parts of me that are confused, it's that allowing them to be there just as they are is such a delicate. Is the awakening really, because then they change or they don't. But there's no.
Just always try to remember who they really are, even when they're insisting that they are a separate being or something. If you try to always remember, the best you can anyway, that they are not at all what they think they are, then you're going to begin to have a very amazing effect upon them anyway, without saying anything. You'll see things changing.
Yeah.
It's a simple, surefire way. I must remember what I am, and that's naturally leads to remembering what everything is, isn't it? As that awakening deepens inside your own self.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. It's like holding that intention without it becoming a fixed thing, but just that. Yeah.
You have amazing power. We all do, to help other beings if we will remember that what we've seen about ourselves applies to them also, because there really aren't any other beings. If each one of us just did that one thing, made an effort to remember what other beings actually are too, the whole world would change overnight, literally, because where we seem to lose our awakening is where we encounter other beings and their challenges, their issues, the things that they need, all of that, you know. So a lot of the time, that's where we are going back into the illusion when we're trying to help someone. And I'm not saying, you know, if somebody needed money, of course, I would help if I could. I'm not just going to stand there next to a homeless person and say, sorry, you know, you don't exist outside of me. Of course, you would help, but inside, I refuse to think that they are anything other than this beautiful universal being. Does that help?
Yeah. Well, and then essentially that's how you're perceiving yourself. So, as you said, it there's no difference. Then it becomes, so how you treat yourself is how you're treating others, like you said at the beginning.
When you refuse to see anything wrong with someone else, even if their behavior is, I'm not talking about condoning bad behavior or abusive behavior or anything like that. What I'm talking about is when you refuse to agree that they're a separate being or that they need to wake up or anything, just inside without saying anything, that begins to have an extraordinary effect anyway. Lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
Very welcome. Lovely, good question. Okay, so we'll bring it to a close there. Thank you for joining me and for your wonderful questions. Namaste.
Thank you.